Before we go into the podcast, I want to just talk about a business that I've set up with my friend George. It is called the Podcast Introduction Group. So if you want to join and be able to be featured on 24 to 48 podcasts to be able to reach an amazing audience, this is the place you need to go to. Podcast, being a guest on podcasts, is automatically establishing you as an authority and is able to build your personal and professional brand. We handpick of a bank of podcasters that we have to be able to grow your business and brand. We do 100% of everything that needs to be done by my team. You do not need to lift a finger. You are able to expose yourself to new and relevant markets by going on other people's podcasts. You also are able to create brand loyalty. People will love listening to you and coming back to your products or services, and it's able to increase your revenue. So if you want to be able to get involved, you can sign up quickly, registered with an account manager. There's an onboarding call where we target the podcasts that you want to be on, the type that you want, whether it's entrepreneurship, business, health, fitness, whatever it is. We then match you to those podcasts and you can start your journey. We have regular catch-ups with our account managers, and Google ranks you when people search for you. So when people are searching for you, you're able to see your podcasts at the top of the list. So if you are interested in being a podcast guest on multiple podcasts, we are the place to go. If you go to podcastintroduction.com and go and register your details, we will have a quick call with you, match your podcast that you want to be on, and we can then start this process ASAP. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Back onto the podcast then. Just one last thing before we go into the podcast. I just wanted to talk to you about the fact that I have a YouTube channel that has been going for quite some time, and I am recording and releasing all of my interviews with some short videos as well on YouTube. So please do check it out. YouTube on Absolute Business Mindset. You'll see a bunch of interviews there, all the longer format interviews and some short videos as well. So please enjoy that. And here goes with the podcast interview. This podcast will educate and inspire with stories of entrepreneurs' journey, and we also explore their why. You will learn from successes and failures to be the best version of yourself. Today we have Ed Vincent, who is the CEO and founder of Festival Pass, which is the world's first live event subscription marketplace. Hello, Ed. How are you today?
Good, Mark. How are you? Glad to be here.
Really good, really good. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to have a lot of fun. You have done a lot of things in your career, which are super impressive. So we are going to touch base on some of those, and we'll spend some time on Festival Pass as well. But I ask the first question to all of my guests, which is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
Yeah, I think I would answer that to say it's even a personal side, which is also business, but a business mindset is having a growth mindset. And all that really means is the willingness to constantly learn, the willingness to constantly keep an open mind, and to realize that, I don't know everything, nor does anybody know everything. And, as life goes on, it's exciting to learn new things and try new experiences.
So what do you do to keep that sort of eternal learning that you're doing? Do you read books? Do you listen to books, podcasts? What's your strategy to absorb new information?
Yeah, all the above, right? So on a podcast perspective, I'm at the gym most days in the morning, and, 9 out of 10 times I will have a podcast on while I'm at the gym, often in the business perspective, but also in the Web3 perspective, learning about everything going on in the world of crypto and Web3 overall. And then also I'm part of a bunch of organizations that really help bring a lot of learning. You may have heard of a global organization called EO or YPO. EO is an entrepreneurs organization. I've been part of it for over 16 years, and has tens of thousands of entrepreneurs throughout the world, and including London and others. So I'm part of the chapter here in Austin, Texas, and I was in New York for 20 years prior to Austin. So for about 15 years in New York, I was part of that chapter. And what happens is there's constant learning opportunities. Just even last week, we brought in a great teacher who I've heard speak a few times named Don Depani, who is originally a monk. He was 10 years in Hawaii, in a cloister as a monk, and then came out and really helps people understand the mind, how you can understand how to move your awareness through the mind, and the fact that the mind is different than awareness. Anyway, just there's many examples, that opportunities that I feel very lucky to have, to be able to share those learning experiences with colleagues and like-minded people.
And what was that organization? Entrepreneur?
It's just EO, which stands for Entrepreneurs Organization.
Okay, I've not heard of it, but I will look into it.
Oh yeah, it's probably one of the top. It's a sister organization of YPO, which is another very well-known global organization. Probably, I would consider the top entrepreneur organizations in the world.
Oh, amazing! I'll check it out. That sounds really interesting. Moving on, if I wanted to know more about you as a person now, what stories or memories do you have of your childhood which would represent that, or be able to share who you were as a child and who you've now become as an adult?
Yeah, I think I'm still the same person throughout most of my life. And the only thing I can think of sharing that's relevant at all is I grew up in a beach town in New Jersey. And it was a town that I would today consider a wealthy town, but was probably one of the poorest families in that wealthy town. So it was a great life, and enjoyed growing up in that environment, but there was always this drive, this being able to see what others have accomplished, and what, a lot of friends, families were entrepreneurs and things they did. And seeing that gave me a taste of, something that I wanted to strive for. And, just fast forward, I still go back to that area of New Jersey down the beach, and I'll be there in a few weeks for a charity race that I created to help raise money for cancer research. But in general, it was always this ability for me to see what could be. And also being about an hour and a half from New York City and traveling into New York City from time to time, it was always like, I need to get there to figure out what this next piece of life could be.
Now, we're going to jump a little bit around, and this was a question I was going to ask later, but I think it's quite relevant what you said. With your childhood, you were around entrepreneurs, you were meeting families that had entrepreneurs as fathers and mothers, but you founded multiple businesses, sold businesses, left businesses, created new businesses. Why do you think there was a calling for you to go into the entrepreneurial world? Is it because of your childhood being around entrepreneurs, or is it another reason?
Possibly. I think I just have always had an entrepreneurial mindset. Again, growing up in that environment where there was opportunity, but we as a family did not have money. I started working, putting together newspapers and washing dishes at 10 years old, and then went on to pump gas at the local gas station. And this is all when I'm 14, 15, 16 years old, which gave me the concept that I can make money for myself. And then, going forward into college, I actually ran a real estate appraisal business out of my dorm room. So I was always in the financial world. I was a finance major at a local estate college in New Jersey, and saw an opportunity in the refinancing boom back in the early 90s, to be able to go ahead and learn how to value things, assets. I was a finance major. It was interesting to me what things were worth. So I was running that real estate appraisal business out of my dorm room. And it just was this constant desire to work for myself. I did then go to be an investment banker in New York City after school, thinking that was the holy grail. It's one of those things as a finance major, you think, hey, well, all those investment bankers in New York City must be the smartest people in the world. They must have figured something out, until I got there. And it's definitely smart people and definitely interesting. But then I realized at the time, I was still being a service provider to other entrepreneurs. And it really got me excited about wanting to break out and be an entrepreneur. It's also, there's context to the time frame. We're talking 1997, 98, 99. The internet 1.0 boom was happening. So when I started my first real business, it was when I left investment banking in 1999 to start my first e-commerce business.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that business because it's a fascinating story that I've seen through City Staff. But I just want to touch a little bit further on investment banking. So you said you met interesting people, clever people. The job was okay, but you felt you were working as a service provider to other entrepreneurs. But why Was it just a pull towards entrepreneurship, or was there something that you didn't like in the banking world?
It's not that I didn't like it. It was a function and I was very interested. I think every entrepreneur should know how to build a P&L and a balance sheet and build forecasts like you learn as an investment banker. So I think it's a crucial tool in understanding business in general. But I just felt I wanted to be the one operating the company and building the company as opposed to, providing an external service.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and then you founded, built, and sold citystaff.com in 2.5 years, which is a pretty good going to be able to start a business, grow it, and then sell it at the same time. So tell me about that business initially. That was your first way into entrepreneurship, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. There's a little context to that as well. As a good friend of that and myself, we used to throw big parties in New York City, whether it was New Year's parties or Halloween parties. And back then, this was the beginning of the internet. And, it was an epiphany one year when we were selling these tickets to some of these parties. It's ironic that my current business is also selling tickets. But we would sell these tickets and we realized, well, hey, it's much easier than meeting on the street corner and getting envelopes full of cash for tickets to this event. Well, why don't we just actually let people buy the ticket directly on the website? And that was that first epiphany. And then from that, we were like, wow, this is interesting. We could sell more stuff on the internet. This is pretty cool. Hence what City Stuff became. We were selling the things that made cities famous. So if you know any of the fun stuff, mostly in the US, New York City bagels and pizza shipped overnight, Junior's cheesecake from Brooklyn shipped overnight. They had a great mail order business at the time. They were doing millions of dollars of cheesecake sales and mail order. We just became their e-commerce engine for that. And then we did that in 7, 8 different cities throughout the US.
And throughout your career, so you mentioned about NFTs and Web3 at the moment. There seems to be a theme of tech being a fascination, being a requirement for your businesses and your AI business, which we may come on to later. What was your fascination with technology, and why has it been so critical throughout all of your career?
Yeah, I think there's a combination between tech, data, and then, entertainment. Those are really kind of the three themes in most of my businesses. Really enjoying the fact that technology-enabled businesses have made it efficient and easy is the wrong word, the ability for transactions to happen in a more efficient, interesting way. I also think it's fascinating the difference between in those early days of 1999, just building an e-commerce engine. There was no Shopify. There was no out of the box thing where for $99 a month, you can set up a store. We had to invest millions of dollars just to be able to have an infrastructure to sell stuff. So that's fascinating to me as time moves on, how it makes it cheaper and cheaper just to start and create an idea. So that's kind of fun. And then advancing straight up to Web3, we can get into that a little later, is I believe it's exactly what it is. It's the third iteration of the internet. And I believe every single business across the world will be Web3 enabled, if not Web3 first over the next 3 to 5 years.
Right, we'll come on to that because that's an area which fascinates me as well. But one of the things you said about why you're fascinated with technology and initially was, how I'm going to rephrase it is, it stops the resistance of money moving. So you can do transactions online a lot quicker, a lot easier than, as you say, like handing cash over and then having to put it into the bank and all the things that we used to do in the 90s. And so do you think technology is always pushing the boundaries and making transactions easier and making it smoother and less resistant? Because money loves to be able to move around seamlessly and without any sort of restrictions or resistance to it actually working. Why do you think that money has been able to move hands quicker through using technology?
Yeah, so we can go down many rabbit holes in that concept. One is you see the evolution of money moving over the internet, advancing very quickly over the past couple of decades. And Web3 is the next iteration of truly what will make that even more seamless. But then there's pitfalls and there's downfalls, right? Is if we're talking about the most recent banking crisis here in the US, that's kind of made the world rethink what's going on, is the flight of deposits in some of the regional banks happening at such a breakneck lightning speed from a mobile device. being able to empty 50 to 100 billion dollars worth of deposits just on a mobile device within a couple of days is something that obviously could have never happened 5 or 10 years ago. So there's a benefit of a positive and a negative, whereas rather than the traditional route of being able to take a moment, think through what's really going on and make rational decisions, having technology at your fingertips has made it easier for people to just make quick reactive decisions and within 2 days empty $100 billion worth of deposits out of banks.
And what do you think about Silicon Valley Bank and the plight of it? Is it actually, from a US perspective, is it going to have a massive impact on technology investments?
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're an online business owner and you want to learn what's working right now to generate leads, grow your following, and get paying clients and customers, then be sure to check out the Digital Trailblazer podcast. Each week, we feature online business owners just like you who are launching and scaling their businesses, and we reveal exactly what they're doing to rise above the competition to build a successful, profitable online business. And what's really unique about the Digital Trailblazer podcast is that you're going to learn these strategies directly from the business owners who are putting them into action and getting results. So head over to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, or just head over to digitaltrailblazer.com for links to all of our episodes.
Oh, interesting question on the investment side is I think there's more macro items at hand than specifically those 3 or 4 banks that had structural issues. And the reality is, if anybody really looks into it, and we could do a whole podcast just on that, the bank run in general, is it really is positioned for just that small sector of types of banks. It was a lot of some mismanagement, and that mismanagement could have been, but it wasn't foreseen, meaning that the reality of it was they just had some assets on their books that were of much lower value due to the quick rising interest rates, which affected a fear. And it's the thing about the financial markets that everybody always says, but until you see it, you don't realize, is it really is an emotional environment, right? Mm. If none of those deposits left because people said, hey, we're going to just wait a second and be rational about this, there really would not have been any real issues. And I'm sure Silicon Valley Bank have found a way to fix their mismatched pricing of interest rate assets that they held. But because everybody left, it created the run on the bank and obviously created the issue. And that's inherently how banks work. It's how crypto works. It's how money works, is it's only as good as the confidence in where it sits.
Yeah. And whether you're talking about finance or economics or currently where technology is, I know AI could change it, but wherever we are talking about these sorts of things, there is still humans behind it, humans driving it, and therefore emotions still have a major impact on business and finance and investing. So I think you're absolutely right there.
To answer your question directly, though, is the one thing I think you're asking was, is there going to be money, venture capital money and other money flowing into technology over the next couple of years? And did this create a problem for that to continue to happen? And the reality is none of the investment firms lost any of their capital. The deposits were made whole, and a lot of them have a ton of money sitting on the sidelines. So I truly believe it's purely, and it's a macroeconomic perspective, right, is for the next 6 to 12 months, there will not be a ton of inflow of investments into startups, into early stage companies. But I believe that seal will break in about 12 months, where all that money will get put to work as the economy kind of stabilizes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. So you started Vincent Partners, which was a marketing and branding agency. We're going to move on from that just to keep the momentum of the conversation going. So you've managed companies, which is hard. So you started many businesses, and then you took on a role as an interim chief data officer at MoviePass. What made you take on sort of job? It appeared when I was doing the research that was an actual job that you took rather than running your own business. What made you need to take on that role there?
Yeah, the truth of it is it was not a job. They hired my company. So okay. when we had a holding company called Predict Analytics, and effectively Predict Analytics was a known data and analytics consultancy for the entertainment space. So we had a lot of big clients like A&E Networks and AMC Networks and a bunch of film studios and movietickets.com and all these companies that played in the TV and film space. So MoviePass sought us out to help them with their data. They were a fast growing subscription company with millions of subscribers, and they were looking for ways to understand their data, to find better ways to either create monetization channels or better understand the consumer data they had. So when they reached out to us, I personally ran that account, and I went in and effectively spent a few days a week in their offices, but still it was through my company. So
Right.
Didn't take a full-time job. And ironically, we ended up bringing in about eventually about 10 people within my organization were working on that account, helping them both in technology and data and a few other issues.
Interesting. Thank you for clearing that up. Look, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I've spent 14 years in corporate, but I'm out of that now, thankfully. And I know that managing companies, running companies, growing companies is hard. Have you or anyone that you know sort of experienced sort of mental health challenges? Because entrepreneurship can be very hard on loneliness and being isolated and sort of all the responsibility coming onto you. Have you ever experienced mental health challenges?
No, not from the business side. So a couple of things is I did mention that organization in the past, EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization, and other organizations that I'm a part of. And at the end of the day, what it does is it provides the ability for myself to surround myself with other people that are going through the same thing. So, even as an example, for all the 15 years I was in the organization in New York and now here in Austin, I was part of a forum. And basically, a forum is made up of anywhere from 6 to 10 individuals, and you meet once a month for about 4 hours. It's really kind of peer advisors. And in that world, you talk through a lot of things that helps get through the loneliness that you talked about running a company, because each person's running their own company. And usually then you're within a chapter of another 250 people all running their own companies. And it provides, that the peer group to really help you through that. And we go on retreats together once a year. So that's just one example. I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by other entrepreneurs. And the truth is there's plenty of ups and downs. Yeah. So I don't think entrepreneurship is for everybody. I've personally taken a choice of kind of compartmentalizing things in order to not let stresses really affect my mental health, while at the same time looking at life holistically. So a lot of times when I think of life in a holistic sense, there's really 3 parts of life. It's your business life, it's your personal life, and it's your family life. And those 3 things, as long as they're generally in balance, I think there's a holistic mental health that can be achieved and is great. And by allowing myself to think through each of those and build each of those in a certain way, it helps that happen. So anyway, so the answer is I don't feel I've gone through that. And I've had plenty of challenges. I went through a long drawn out divorce and I have 3 beautiful daughters. And just going through that process has probably been even more challenging than the business side.
Yeah, and we'll touch on it. We don't need to go into a great deal of detail, but so what is family for you? Is you said you're 3 girls, and I'm not sure if you're in a relationship now, you got maybe parents, things like that. How important is family to you in your entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, it's extremely important. So I have my 3 daughters, and I do have a partner that I live with here in Austin that I've been with for years. I feel I have that support and the infrastructure. I have a sister, 2 brothers that I see as often as possible. And I believe it's very important. The thing that also is interesting, right? Again, community to me is family, right? So of course there's the immediate family, the blood relatives, and of course they mean the most to me in my heart. But the community and the people that are willing to kind of be in things together is what I consider family. I'm still super close to a lot of my friends I grew up with in New Jersey that I'll see in a few weeks. Still extremely close to entrepreneurs that I've kind of been with for the last couple of decades. And it's nice to find communities wherever you go. So even here in Austin, I'm part of that EO community, but I'm also part of a separate startup community, which is even more fun. I often go to different events where there's dinners of like-minded people. And so it's about just building community around myself and for others to make sure you're never in that situation where you don't feel like you have a family.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think so. I'm part of a few different groups sort of set up to support entrepreneurs and run things by when you're struggling with something, having that sort of support. I've had coaches, I've had mentors personally as well as these sort of groups, networking groups. And as you say, it can be isolating, it can be lonely being at the top on your own. Obviously, business partners might help as well. But I think it's super important for my listeners that are listening here that entrepreneurship can be lonely, but as long as you feel that you've got the right support around you, and that can be emotional support, it can be business support, but just being in community is a really great way of being able to connect with others. And I think that's essentially what we're all trying to do, whether we're doing it in business, family, friends, life, is just connecting, whether you're connecting with friends, family, or connecting with your clients.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. And that's that holistic approach to life.
What makes you happy and what makes you fulfilled?
Sure. It'd be silly not to share. What makes me happy is spending time with my daughters. I really seeing them grow. My oldest is going to college next year. So seeing them go through that process and get to almost adulthood, maybe legal adulthood, but probably in
It still
today's
takes a few more years to actually
and the
to be an
millennial and
adult.
Gen Zs of today probably won't be an adult till she's 25. But anyway, just happy to see that whole process happen and to see that they're good, strong kids. That makes me happy. Spending time with my partner makes me happy. Just having time. Obviously, because of my business, I love live events. It makes me happy when I can see this amazing band in an intimate setting within Austin or other places. It makes me happy when I see kindness in the world. So with all the crazy, awful things that go on in the world, every little act of kindness you see happen, whether it's a small, nice thing you see at the local coffee shop or somebody goes out of their way to help somebody else out, makes me smile.
Fantastic. Look, we'll come on to Festival Pass very soon. I just want to touch on one thing, that you're a founder and board member of the Kate Shear Foundation. And Kate was someone that someone that you knew that died at 25 of leukemia?
Yeah, you do your research. So yeah, that was the event that I was referring to coming up in a couple of weeks. And so the Kate Shear Foundation, I created it with another friend of mine, actually my original founder of my first business, City Stuff. So the two of us are still friends today.
Right.
And he's still the host of the podcast that we have for Festival Pass. We have a podcast that talks about behind the scenes of live events, and he's the host of that. Anyway, the point is we started this organization. Our friend, a high school friend, had passed away at 25 from leukemia. And it was a way for us to all come together to find a meaning for it. And it's going on 20 years now that we've been doing it. And what's wonderful is every year it becomes, aside from COVID, we didn't do it for a couple of years, but it becomes a reunion for all the people we grew up with. And it's been a way for others touched by illness in general, whether it's leukemia or any cancer, can come together and be a part of a community. So we have about 1,000 people that run a race in New Jersey and then have a nice big after party after. But we've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and have donated it to cancer research.
That's amazing. Amazing. I love that. Have you been able to find meaning? Because I've experienced multiple losses. I've lost both my parents, my brother, and grandparents as well in a relatively short period. We're just having a quick break from the episode today. Thank you so much for joining me today. What I want you to do is, can you do one thing for me? Can you go and text one of your friends a link to the show, whether it's on Apple or Spotify or any other of the podcast providers, and text a friend of yours that you love this show and they should be listening to it. It's a simple request, and I really would appreciate if all you do is give that text to a friend, family member or colleague. And lastly, if you do want to see more information about the podcast, go to absolutebusinessmindset.com. Right, back to the interview. Were you able to find meaning from such a tragic experience of someone cut short at 25?
Yeah, in hindsight, right, we're looking back 20 years, but in hindsight, the meaning is that event brought so many people together and gave so many others a chance to extend that community. I don't know today if so many of the people we grew up with would still be interconnected had that not happened, because it gives a reason for everybody to come together once a year. And then in addition to that, there's obviously other events have happened throughout my life. Both my parents have passed, and just realizes that we all are, we're just leasing this life, right? We're just here for a short period of time, and just be the best person you can be while you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's fast forward to today, to Festival Pass. So it's a live event subscription marketplace. Why don't you tell me the origins of, because it's been a journey. You've been involved in media and events previously. It all feels like you were all moving towards this point where you started Festival Pass. So why don't you tell me what it is, what you do in the business, and anything else you want to share about it?
Yeah, so you answered it right. It's a subscription membership for live events. So at the core, people pay either a monthly or an annual fee, and they become a member. And as a member, they get a certain amount of credits depending upon whatever tier they're on. And then they can spend those credits or redeem those credits for over 80,000 live events on the platform. So it could be concerts, it could be festivals, it could be comedy shows, it could be any sporting event that you want to go to, that all exist on the platform. And people are able to utilize the credits they get from paying monthly or annually in order to redeem to get tickets to go to those events. That's the core. The big picture really is, and playing on the community aspect of it, is in the live event space for the last few decades, it's been a very transactional space. Nobody really loves where they get tickets from. There's not really a lot of brand affinity to ticketing partners. So I really felt that there's a better opportunity to build a community and a membership around passion connected experiences. And that's kind of our mission, is, to have people engage more in passion connected experiences. And that means people love music and they want to connect around it. They love sport and they want to connect around it. They love comedy and they want to connect around it. So how can we build a community where they can come together and get to know each other and be part of this thing called Festival Pass as a member, and in so doing, be able to get access to some great tickets without paying additional transaction fees, as well as other things. We have hotels on the platform as well.
So would you have, I don't know, Bruce Springsteen event if he played New York or something like that, or someone plays the LA Bowl? Would you have those sorts, or are they more niche, smaller sort of events platforms?
No, we have everything. So yes, we would have Bruce Springsteen, which many members went to Bruce when he came through Austin at the Moody Center. We have Taylor Swift,
equally, he plays for like 3 hours, doesn't he? I've heard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. People say his tickets are too expensive until they go to the show, and they're like, "Wow, that was epic." But yeah, everything from Taylor Swift to Beyonce to, you name the biggest festivals out there. We just had a bunch of people go to Coachella a few weeks ago. But yes, we pretty much have all the big major events. And we do have smaller events as well. And we're continuously, and it's kind of one of our focuses over the next couple of years, is to create localized experiences that include all of the local smaller events in addition to the big marquee events.
Surely COVID was absolutely crippling for your business. How did you navigate and manage through that difficult time for events, live events?
Yeah, the silver lining to it was we didn't launch before COVID. So basically, we were about to launch right when COVID came to be. We had already kind of officially launched the company. I officially kind of left my previous company to work full time on this. And then all of a sudden, COVID came. Luckily, we had received a little bit of an investment prior to that. So instead of hiring a bunch of people, we just kept a very kind of small staff and built the technology. So we spent about 1.5 years building the infrastructure of the technology, building the relationships of the ticket aggregators and providers where we can get access to the tickets. And it really wasn't until about 1.5 years ago where it kind of all started coming together, where we had the infrastructure in place, the inventory in place, and now it was time for us to go out and share with the world what we're doing.
Why do people, and I think I know what your answer going to be, connection and sort of community, but why do people love going to live events, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's comedy? What is that connection that you get at live events that you can't get watching a special on Netflix?
Yeah, it's a one-time thing. That event will never happen in the same way again. Like, you know how there's a great, I don't even know where the parable comes from, but it's no man will ever cross a river twice. And the answer is why? Well, it will never be the same man. It will never be the same river. And I think the same exists for live events. You're at an event, if there's 20 people or 200,000 people, maybe not that big, maybe 20,000 people. It's those 20,000 people at that moment with that artist, with that team, which is so interesting and electric. And then the second thing is when the community is around, it's the amplification of those emotions, right? So there's a whole concept of crowd theory of what happens in crowds versus when you're an individual. So when you're watching something on screen, it's different, right? It's a different concept. You're still receiving the content, but you're not sharing that experience with others. And I think that shared experience is innately who we are as humans, which makes live events that much more powerful.
Yeah, so I used to go to quite a lot of gigs and concerts, and one of the things that I found so fascinating, especially for music concerts, is the drums. When you've got the drums pounding and you feel it in your chest when the vibrations of the drums. That was one of the biggest things when I was young. What always fascinated me, that you just can't recreate it in any other way apart from being at that live event. Who's your favorite? What's the last either festival, gig, concert that you've been to?
Oh, okay. I go to a lot.
Okay.
I'm just trying to
What's in
think.
the last
So,
month then?
yeah, no, just last Friday, we sponsored a small festival here in Austin called the Mocha Festival, and went out there, and they were mostly like jazz and bluegrass and some funk. And that was just fun, even though it was relatively small, maybe 100 people total at this event. But just loved that kind of soulful experience in music. Prior to that, I've been to numerous festivals. ACL here in Austin is one of the best. Just a great experience of 50,000 people coming together and all different kind of artists. I've been lucky enough to be to almost every major sporting event, including a Super Bowl, a World Series,
Oh, wow.
and numerous things. There's still a couple I haven't been to, right? I haven't been to the Kentucky Derby. I keep telling myself I got to go, but never get around to it. And I haven't been to Jazz Fest in New Orleans, which I really want to go to. And it just passed this past weekend, and I didn't get a chance to get there. But anyway, so there's all of that. I have been to many an arena show, and the same goes for both comedy as well as for music. Is whether it's The Who playing at the Moody Center, or I think I've been to Chris Rock and Kevin Hart recently. From a comedy perspective, yes, they're great. It's funny. You're with 20,000 other people, but I also love the intimate rooms. I often go to shows here in Austin where there's 50 to 100 people in the room. Oh, another great experience. I'll quickly mention, I can move on, but during South by Southwest, which is a kind of a known international festival here in Austin, there we partnered with a large music magazine called Spin Magazine, and we did a bunch of events here in Austin. And we even we took an old city bus and wrapped it in branding. And inside of it, we created a mobile content studio. It was a soundproof, effectively, studio. You would understand that from the podcast side.
Yeah.
And we had the Spin Magazine editorial team interviewing about 25 bands that came through. And one of those bands was an old school rapper named Killer Mike. He was part of the duo called Run the Jewels, which I didn't fully understand who he was until I got to see him, but he was very popular. But anyway, we ended up in this really intimate kind of show because there was a lightning storm. So the thousands of people he was supposed to perform in front of all went away, and ended up being a performance in front of a couple hundred people. But those moments are those really interesting things that happen. So I love all kinds of music, all kinds of art, and been a few Broadway shows through Festival Pass recently as well.
Amazing. Wow. That sounds like my ideal job or ideal business to have. Just going to different festivals, events, concerts, comedy shows. Look, thank you for sharing that about Festival Pass. I'm going to ask you a question, which is a big question, but we're going to have to keep it quite tight. But Web3, NFTs, blockchain, AI. So all these things that are really going to impact technology, really going to impact business, careers, people in their jobs. But I'm going to ask you about the metaverse. What's your view on I have a slight issue with the metaverse. Web3, I know they're all connected, and NFTs, I've got friends that are in NFTs and doing stuff there, and I can see the value of AI, and we could do another podcast just on AI. But I'm interested about the metaverse. Do you think, one of the questions I've had and what's happened with Meta and Facebook with the metaverse is, do you actually think anyone actually wants to be immersed in the metaverse?
Yeah, so I can answer that question in two ways. First, just purely on the metaverse side of it, and then I can tell you what we're doing in Web3 with Festival Pass, which is not traditionally the metaverse. Okay. But the answer is, I think it's something that we all have to remember the different generations that exist within our society, right? So looking at you and having this conversation, the metaverse might not be our first point of touch, especially because we just talked about how much we love live and being there physically in front of it. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can still love live and being physically with people while still explore things in the metaverse. I do think there are a lot of business opportunities in the metaverse that will, and it's more technology enabling. You can use so many different examples, whether it's real estate, where you can actually take a tour of a home in a different city before you even set foot in it to give some textual context to why you might want to even look at it. And numerous other ways where people can have business meetings or conferences where people are touching and feeling where they just physically can't get on a plane and get there. So I do think there's a lot of business-driven opportunity. But on the consumer side, you talk about it with generations, like kids, right? There's kids that are Gen Y, Gen Z, even some millennials, is they've lived in this world for a long time. They've lived with a phone in their pocket. They play in virtual worlds and spend a ton of time doing it. From a gaming perspective, Twitch, that became a multi-billion-dollar company that Amazon bought, people are just watching other people play games effectively in some kind of metaverse environment. You know, what happens at the next stage of that and where it goes. So while you and I may not want to, you know, log onto a computer or put a headset on and physically do something that we'd rather do in person, I do believe generations see it differently.
Interesting. I've not thought about it that way, that it's a generational thing. And you make a really valid point. People are immersed on Xbox and PS5s and going online and experiencing worlds in that way. That's an interesting point. Being 43 now, I'm just a little bit more cynical. Not cynical, but just I see a lot of the value in technology. And as I say, like, we could do a whole episode on AI and blockchain and NFTs, which we don't have time to talk about today. But I think you're right. So I was brought up in the late 80s and early 90s. I didn't have a mobile phone till I was 17 or 18, 97, 98. Kids are like, even I've got a 7 and 9-year-old, two girls. And although they've got like our old phones, has no SIM card, but they're on the mobile phone getting used to apps and using it and interacting with it so much more than what maybe we were doing when we were younger. So I think that's a valid point. And they're growing up with it absolutely part of society and culture, which maybe us as slightly older, I won't say old, slightly older, see that there may be maybe limitations to it. So, okay, look, thank you for that. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. They're a little bit thought provoking as well and totally unrehearsed. You've not had the questions beforehand. The first question is, what was the best decision that you've made in your career or life?
Best decision, I'd say, was to have children, because they provided immense happiness and gratitude and all that. So from a life perspective, and I, from a business perspective, just simply choosing to be an entrepreneur, choosing to follow the things and passions that I love. On your deathbed, you can only look back and say, what did I try versus what do I regret I never did?
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I don't know if I've given it directly, but it's something I believe in. And I think some people attribute it to Jeff Bezos, but it's just a simple concept of be rigid on vision, but flexible on details.
Okay, nice.
Just the simple concept of saying, hey, if you see a vision that you want to accomplish or go after, don't sway from that vision, but also allow it to happen down a path that you might not have predetermined, meaning that there's a lot of details along the way that might change and pivots that might happen. But as long as you keep hold on the vision, you'll get there.
Really good advice. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
I don't know if I can label a specific person, but I would say my EO entrepreneur group and the people that I've spent time with often, like my forum, have been a great source of confidence, like meaning that through all the ups and downs, they've been consistent. I'd give it to my original forum of 7, 8 people. So I can't name one.
Okay, fair enough. Tell me about a regret that you have.
A regret is probably the wrong word, but a potential mistake is when I did sell City Stuff. That was my first original company. I can't regret it because nothing else. I wouldn't be doing what I do today had I not sold it. But when I sold it, it was, we had gotten a bunch of stock in the company that bought us, and I thought I was rich on paper, only to realize 9/11 came and a lot of that millions of dollars of value went away. But I think I would have held on. And the reason why I would have held on is it was only a few years thereafter that Google came to be. And the idea that you can have a search engine driving traffic to a website. And the only way we got exposure back then was taking out ads in magazines or standing with a big sign in the front of a Good Morning America in the morning telling people that we existed.
Interesting. What are you most proud of?
I think I'd say that even with trials and tribulations, I've always leaned towards kindness. Like what I said originally is just treating people well. It's like anybody that knows me knows that I'm at heart, a kind soul. So as long as we all have our times that we're not perfect. As a whole, I think I'm proud of being consistent there.
Yeah, kindness. It costs nothing to be a good person and a nice person. Like, you can make difficult decisions, absolutely, and we all have to at different times through our careers and businesses. But yeah, as a base, I think it's a good trait, absolutely. What does legacy mean to you?
Yeah, the word happens a lot in our community, like our entrepreneur community, where people talk about legacy. And for me, I think it's a little bit different. I'm not so hell-bent on providing that legacy that when I leave, that people look back and see that he built this company or he did this. For me, it's really just, again, leaving the world with people saying everybody he touched felt that kindness. They felt respected. They felt what that is. So, and again, it goes back to my spiritual kind of world, is I believe that we're only leasing this life for a while. So the 100 years that we have on this earth, do I really care if 500 years down the road my name is on a college? I really don't. But for me, it's just the time I'm here to live a good life and be respected is the only legacy I care about.
Amazing. And I missed a question earlier on just before we finish. What's the future plans for Festival Pass? What's the next 2 to 5 years look like for you, Ed?
Yeah, the one thing I didn't get to say, and I'll say it really quickly, is we do have what I call a lifetime membership. So people can buy a membership once on the platform and have live events forever in perpetuity. And that is an NFT. So that's why Web3 was required to make that happen. So when they buy this lifetime membership, they get an NFT. They immediately get $1,200 worth of credits to spend on any event they want to go to. And then every year on the anniversary date, they get another $1,200 to spend. So effectively, once they own it, and it's a digital asset, so they can sell it whenever they want in the future.
Oh, what a great idea.
So when you ask about what the next 2 years look like, is first, we just started selling these. So we want to sell all 10,000 of these lifetime memberships because we believe that creates this strong crux of a family, because everybody that owns one will have a shared ownership in the company, not an equity ownership in actual stock, but a shared ownership in an asset they can sell in the future. So once that kind of infrastructure is in place, I'll get pretty excited about what we can do from that community. And then every software has a roadmap 5 miles long. So there's so many things we want to do to enhance the platform, bring in more benefits to our members, get special access for them at major events. And then once we can do that here fully in the US, I think Europe's our next goal. And
Amazing.
then after Europe, Asia, and we'll see where we
come to
Latin
the UK.
America.
Definitely, I'd be interested in buying a membership. Absolutely. Let me know if you're moving to the UK. Your business is moving to the UK. And lastly, just before we finish, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you after hearing you on this podcast?
Yeah, so for the business, festivalpass.com is the easiest place to go. You can sign up for free, get a membership, all the above, all the socials. It's at Get Festival Pass on Instagram, on Twitter, and then just Festival Pass on TikTok. And then for me personally, like you, LinkedIn is usually the kind of place I spend most of my time from a business networking perspective. So just my name, Ed Vincent, on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Look, thank you so much for your time today, Ed. It's been absolutely fascinating. So many different weaves and different stories that you've got within the different areas that you've touched on. We didn't even get a chance to touch on predictive analysis and connected intelligence, but maybe for another day. But thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure my audience are going to get great value for your story as an entrepreneur. So thank you very much, Ed. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.